No one knew where this dog came from, but for nearly 10 years, he returned to the same train station through every season and waited there until the final moments of his life. Hachi's story remains one of cinema's most moving portraits of loyalty between a dog and his owner. The film frames that story through Ronnie, who tells his class why his grandfather's dog will always be his hero. The story begins on a cold winter evening. Music professor Parker Wilson steps off his train and finds a lost Akita puppy wandering alone at the station. Parker waits on the platform with the puppy, but no owner ever appears. He asks station manager Carl to keep the puppy temporarily in case someone returns to claim him. Carl can shelter the dog for only one night before sending him to the local animal pound. Parker cannot bring himself to leave the puppy there, so he takes him home for the weekend. Parker had promised his wife, Kate, that they would not bring another dog into the house, so he initially tries to hide the puppy from her. While Parker and Kate are in bed, the puppy slips into the bedroom and licks Kate's foot. Startled by the discovery, Kate listens as Parker promises to find the puppy's real owner. Parker had owned dogs before, and the doghouse in the yard was still there, so he temporarily settled the puppy in it. Worried that the puppy will feel alone, Parker brings out old toys and leaves a light on beside the doghouse. Both Parker and his daughter Andy really liked the puppy, but Kate had already made up her mind. By Saturday morning, Kate has printed lost dog notices. Parker considers leaving the puppy at a shelter, but learns that an unclaimed dog could be euthanized after only 2 weeks. Parker takes the puppy to bookstore owner Mary Ann while posting notices and gently suggests that she might adopt him. Mary Ann's cat immediately swats at the puppy, making it clear that her bookstore is not the right home for him. On Monday, Parker stops at Jasjeet's hot dog stand near the station and asks whether he wants a dog. Jasjeet politely declines, saying a dog would be too much responsibility. Parker also checks with Carl, but no one has reported the missing puppy. With nowhere else to leave him, Parker secretly carries the puppy onto the train. During class, Parker asks whether any student wants to adopt a dog, but no one volunteers. The puppy's crate bears Japanese writing, so Parker asks his colleague Ken Fujiyoshi for help. Ken identifies the puppy as an Akita, a Japanese breed known for its independence and loyalty. The tag around the puppy's neck carries the Japanese character for 8, which Ken explains is considered lucky. Parker names him Hachi, the Japanese word for 8. When Parker asks Ken to adopt him, Ken replies that Hachi has already chosen Parker. In the end, Parker brought Hachi home. Before Kate can adjust, Hachi follows his instincts and chews apart the architectural model she spent years building. Parker quickly returns Hachi to the doghouse. The couple argues, but when strong winds sweep through the yard that night, Parker brings Hachi into his study. Parker and Hachi share popcorn while watching a game, and before long, both fall asleep on the couch. When Kate enters the study, the peaceful sight begins to soften her feelings toward Hachi. The next day, Parker tries to teach Hachi to fetch. The dog refuses, even when Parker gets on all fours to demonstrate the game himself. Kate watches from the window, amused by Parker's efforts. Then a caller responds to the notice and offers to adopt Hachi. As Kate prepares to take the caller's information, she looks outside and sees Parker happily playing with Hachi in the yard. Kate changes her mind and tells the caller that Hachi has already found a home. Hachi soon grows into an adult Akita. One morning, after Parker leaves for work, Hachi digs beneath the fence and follows him all the way to the station. No matter how much Parker tried to send him away, Hachi just wouldn't leave. Parker misses his train while trying to take Hachi home. Once Kate arrives, she takes the dog and tells Parker to catch the next train. After Parker leaves, Hachi spends the day watching through the fence and waiting for him. Suddenly, as if sensing something, he jumped over the fence and ran out. At almost 5 o'clock, the time Parker normally returns, Hachi suddenly knows exactly where to go. He races to the station and waits on the flower bed directly across from the exit. The moment Hachi saw Parker, he leapt into his arms. Parker could hardly believe what he was seeing. That evening, Andy brings her boyfriend, Michael, to meet the family. Parker introduces Michael to Hachi, the family's newest member. Michael immediately likes Hachi, but no matter how often he throws the ball, Hachi refuses to fetch it. Parker explains that Hachi has simply never been interested in fetching. Ken later explains that Akitas do not perform simply to please people. Hachi's daily wait at the station reflects a deep bond with Parker. If Hachi ever chooses to fetch, Ken says it will be for an important reason. From then on, Hachi walks Parker to the station each morning and watches him board the train. Every afternoon at 5, Hachi returns to meet Parker and walk home with him. When Andy and Michael marry, Hachi joins the family wedding portrait. One afternoon, Parker returns to find Hachi missing from the station. At home, he discovers that a skunk has trapped the dog near his shed. Parker tries to cover the skunk with a box, but both he and Hachi are sprayed in the process. The two end up sharing a much-needed bath. Later, while Parker sits with Hachi, Andy arrives with the news that she is pregnant. Overjoyed, Parker leaves the doghouse to celebrate with his daughter. Watching Parker leave, Hachi seemed a bit lonely. One morning, Hachi refuses to walk to the station and barks anxiously, as if he senses that something is wrong. After comforting Hachi for a moment, Parker left. Suddenly, Hachi picks up the ball and races after Parker. He catches Parker outside the station and, for the first time, asks him to play fetch. This change made Parker very happy. Parker happily throws the ball several times. As his train approaches, he prepares to leave, but Hachi grows increasingly distressed. After hugging Hachi, Parker still walked into the station. During his music class, Parker suffers a fatal stroke at the piano and collapses in front of his students. At 5 that afternoon, Hachi waits in his usual place, but Parker never walks through the station doors. At 9:30 that night, Michael finally arrives and brings Hachi home. From his doghouse, Hachi hears Kate and the family mourning inside the house. Unable to understand Parker's death, Hachi returns to the station the next day and waits for him as usual. Even when it got dark and heavy snow started to fall, Hachi still refused to leave. Carl gently tells Hachi that Parker is gone and will not be coming back. Kate eventually sells the house and moves away, while Hachi goes to live with Andy, Michael, and their infant son Ronnie. Hachi soon escapes. Michael chases after him, but the dog disappears before he can catch up. Hachi follows the railroad tracks toward Bedridge, resting beside them at night and continuing at sunrise. He first returns to the house he shared with Parker, only to discover that a new family now lives there. With his old home gone, Hachi returns to the station and resumes his place beside the flower bed. Jasjeet notices that Hachi is hungry and begins feeding him from the hot dog stand. Andy and Michael eventually find Hachi at the station and take him home again. Andy tells Hachi that she wants him to stay, but she will not force him to live somewhere he does not want to be. She opens the gate. Hachi looks back at Andy, licks her hand, and then runs toward the station. Hachi returns to the flower bed every day. When he needs food, Jasjeet and other shopkeepers quietly make sure he has something to eat. At night, Hachi sleeps near the railroad tracks. Days become months, and still he continues waiting. One day, another pet dog approaches Hachi, but the other dog's owner soon calls it away. Left alone again, Hachi turns back toward the station doors and continues watching for Parker. Hachi's daily vigil becomes local news, and a reporter publishes a story about the loyal dog. Readers send donations and cards, while the station community uses the money to care for Hachi. Ken learns about Hachi's continued waiting from the newspaper. Ken visits the station and tells Hachi in Japanese that he misses Parker too, then urges the old dog to take care of himself. Seasons pass and years accumulate, yet Hachi never abandons his routine. On the 10th anniversary of Parker's death, Kate returns to town to visit his grave. When Kate leaves the station, she immediately recognizes Hachi waiting outside. Nearly 10 years have passed, and Hachi is now old and frail. Kate embraces him and realizes he has waited for Parker all these years. She sits beside Hachi, and together they watch the next train arrive. On a snowy night, the elderly Hachi gathers his remaining strength and makes one final trip to the station. Too weak to sit on the flower bed, he lies down in his familiar place. Hachi watches the station doors, then slowly closes his eyes as memories of his years with Parker return. In Hachi's final dream, the doors open and Parker walks out. Hachi runs into his arms once more. For one last moment, their years apart disappear, and Parker is waiting for him again. It is the reunion Hachi has imagined every day. But the scene exists only in Hachi's final dream, as his long wait comes to an end. After nearly a decade of devotion, Hachi dies at the station where he last saw Parker. The film was inspired by a true story. The real Hachiko was born in Odate, Japan, in 1923 and belonged to Tokyo Imperial University professor Hidesaburo Ueno. Professor Ueno died unexpectedly in 1925. Hachiko continued returning to Shibuya Station for nearly 10 years, until his own death in March 1935. A bronze statue of Hachiko still stands outside Shibuya Station in honor of his loyalty. The story avoids elaborate twists and builds its emotional force through small, repeated moments of everyday life. That simplicity is exactly what makes Hachi's final wait so powerful. Hachi's devotion reminds us not to forget the people we have loved. Distance and death can end a routine, but they cannot erase the bond that gave it meaning. Perhaps Hachi eventually understood that Parker was gone. Even so, returning to the station kept their life together close to him. His daily vigil became both an act of loyalty and an expression of love. For Hachi, loyalty meant carrying that love forward without forgetting. That is why his quiet routine reached far beyond the people who knew Parker personally. The story moves audiences because Hachi asks for nothing in return. He simply remains faithful to the person who once gave him a home. Few expressions of love are as patient or as unconditional as Hachi's. For Ronnie, Hachi remains the clearest example of loyalty, love, and never forgetting family.